More details are coming out about the murderer in Highland Park, how exactly he was able to get the weapons that he used to kill so many people. And now there's this new element having to do with his father. His father has spoken out. We can't show you the footage, unfortunately, because of local news and all that. But he says that he raised his son with good morals. He said he's also not worried about a criminal investigation into his own potential culpability after he signed off on the what it was called an FOID, the firearm owner's ID affidavit, a thing that is necessary to get a firearm in that state, to go through the background check process and all that. We're gonna dive into a lot of the details about that and whether perhaps there should be some culpability. But I wanna start off with, Ben, I know that if you were to grow up, to have a child, the child grows up and then they commit a horrendous act like that, I can't even conceive of what that experience must be like. And so I generally approach this sort of thing with, I'm not necessarily going to jump in and judge this person and their choices without a lot of evidence. But I also believe nobody in America needs you to come out today and say, no, he had good morals after he killed a bunch of people. I just feel like you cannot say anything. I think that's an option that you could take in the immediate aftermath of this. Funerals are still being scheduled, and all that. So I feel like you just wait a little bit. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when you have a family member that does something like horrific, right? Like, like we shouldn't be like going to people saying, we demand that you condemn like your family member, but like also be respectful and just maybe shut up, right? Maybe shut up, maybe like visit them when they're in jail if you really care for them, and then kind of just like leave it at that and recognize that like, wow, this is somebody that I care for and they did something that is absolutely undefensible and horrific and nightmarish. If you still feel like you want to maintain a relationship with them, that does not require you to defend them in any way, shape, or form. It especially doesn't require you to make public statements about their supposed good moral character. It's I think that speaks to sort of another level. I mean, there's like a whole layer to this. Like, look, in our society, we view racism as something that's just this normal background baseline thing. If there's some edgy teenager saying the N-word on Xbox Live, like you have a lot of parents that are like, well, that's just kids being kids. And in this case, we're seeing this to the extreme degree.
Yeah, 100%. And I get that maybe he's just trying to say that like I tried to raise him with good morals, but again, look, I know that you got to be feeling really defensive or whatever, but this really isn't about you. You don't need to make it about you. And the issue isn't about what message he's putting out. It's about the choices that were actually made, which, understanding that all of what we're about to dive into is preliminary. It is possible that some of this could be nuanced or whatever, but when you start to look into it, it's looking like, hey, maybe something could have been done. Because a lot of people are pointing out that there are versions of red flag laws in that state, and oh no, they failed. Some on the right will then say, well, then there's no point in having them. That's insanity to me. And also, by the way, they don't even want them to exist. So when they're critiquing their effectiveness or whatever, understand that they don't want them to be there. The issue is, damn, this person for whom it seemed like there were so many outward signs that they were someone who might commit an act of violence, it didn't catch them. But maybe it should have. Maybe if people had been responsible, if they had done what they should have done, it could have. And to that, I'm not purely hypothesizing. Let's dive into what actually happened. So as we pointed out in the intro, the father in this case, Bob, sponsored his son's firearm owner's identification card 2.5 years ago. This is despite the fact that there had been 2 instances of police being called to their home over threatening behavior. And we're gonna describe what those actually look like and try to figure out, using common sense, would you, following these instances, have made it possible for your child to buy a gun? So the Illinois police are saying, based on when that application came in January 2020, there was insufficient basis to reject it, okay? That, again, could be nuanced. Maybe they knew more than they're admitting to. But for right now, we're gonna focus on the dad. So the dad at the time knew that police had been called to their home twice earlier that same year because his son had threatened to kill himself and the rest of his family back in April of 2019 An individual contacted the Highland Park Police Department a week after learning of the son's attempted suicide, and months later, in September of that year, a family member reported that that kid had a collection of knives and said he was going to, quote, kill everyone. The police responded to this. They went to the residence. They removed 16 knives, a dagger, and a sword from the home. At the time, though, they said there was no probable cause to arrest and no complaints were signed by any of the victims. Now, all of that being true, knowing that your son has talked about suicide, has talked about killing other people too, to then make it possible for them to buy a gun, that's already enough for us to have a major issue with. But look at this added detail. Apparently, the father claimed that all of those knives were his, and they were being stored in the individual's, the son's closet for safekeeping. Based upon that information, the Highland Park police gave the knives back. So not only were the threats to self and others potential cause to trigger red flag laws, assuming someone around this person lets the authorities know, but to effectively cover up who owned all of those weapons. The fact that at least a knife and sword arsenal had been accrued, for you to actively deceive the police, to make it impossible for them to do their job and to weed out people who might be a threat of violence, Ben. That's where just saying the red flag laws failed is not going nearly far enough. Why did they fail? Well, they failed seemingly because the father caused them to fail. He hid evidence. He made it possible for this kid to get those guns.
Yeah, I mean, and I would go a layer further, because the reality is, and this is something that I talk about a lot, which is just the fact that like ultimately laws only matter to the extent that they are enforced. So a red flag law is only going to be as good as the police department that's enforcing it. And unfortunately, in the United States of America, it seems as though police tend to sympathize more with people like white nationalists and like these violent right-winger types then they, empathize with basically anybody else. So when they see in this circumstance, they see a dad, right? And they're like, oh, he's just like me, and he's, doing this, that, or other thing. He's taking care of his kid. Oh, don't worry about it. And they see themselves, right? They're empathizing more with these people than the potential victims of this violence. And it is this sort of patriarchal mindset that exists within police forces, right? And this white supremacist mindset that exists within police forces, where instead of thinking about the people that would potentially be victimized by individuals like this person who later, committed a mass shooting, they're thinking about how much they relate to these individuals. And so fundamentally, these red flag laws are not gonna make a difference unless we also pair it with like real reformation and restructuring of our policing system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also like definitely structurally in terms of law enforcement, yeah, but also I think we can all agree that this father, I think, objectively made a lot of mistakes at the very least. And those mistakes, plausibly a line can be drawn between that and people losing their lives. I don't think the father needed any guidance or training to have done the right thing in these cases. But I think we also socially and culturally could start to let people know to maybe be on the lookout for this sort of thing. Not just to stop mass shootings from happening, but to be, I don't know, a little bit more compassionate about the people around you. We live in very difficult times and they're only getting worse seemingly on a daily basis. Maybe we should start to watch out for each other. In this particular case though, I wanna raise one additional point. There's a few other things we're gonna dive into, but one is, and maybe this is a failing of mine that I respond so often and repetitively to stupid points that I hear constantly. So this killer had a bunch of knives, a sword, and all that. And then went through the trouble of getting this FOID, doing the background checks, and getting a gun. Now, the system failed and didn't weed out the person at that point, but plausibly it could have. They could have, in the process of doing those background checks, looked into this person more and maybe stopped them from committing their crime. So why did the shooter go to all of this trouble to get the gun when some people will assure us they could have killed as many people with the knives they already had, the sword they already had? If those weapons were just as deadly, why to go to all the trouble and expense and potentially be discovered and stopped from committing your evil acts in getting the guns? Of course, reasonable people understand that because they couldn't have possibly done the damage that they did with a knife or with a sword. But just in case there's an idiot watching this, I wanted to respond to that. By the way, additional details being revealed. Apparently, the Highland Park shooter also seriously contemplated doing a shooting in Madison, had like driven there and then contemplated, but apparently decided that they hadn't done enough planning at this point or something like this. So there could have been an even higher death toll before this person was eventually discovered. So I guess, Ben, at least there's a little bit of good news that didn't happen. This person could have, gone out in a misplaced blaze of glory, shooting even more people. It's good that at least that was stopped at some point.
Yeah, but I mean that really just speaks to like the failures that existed. Everything, like everyone failed, right? Everyone failed in this instance, right? Like the parents failed, the police failed, like everybody failed in this instance because there were clearly warning signs. There were clearly things that led up to this. I've even seen like reporting that he had got kicked out of a synagogue previously because they thought he was suspicious, right? And so like these types of things, right? They're like plenty of warning signs, but unfortunately, our society, when our systems of enforcement see a young white man doing things like this, they're more likely to be like, oh, well, but think about like, oh, maybe he's got a hard life or like this, that, or the other. Maybe he was bullied or whatever. But no, actually, when things like this happen, you actually need to like step in and do something and not just mope around and try and empathize with the person.
Exactly. Yeah. No. You know who had a hard life? The victims and the victims' families and friends. They have a hard life. You know, has a hard life. Virtually everyone on some level has a hard life. As far as I know, you Ben, you've never shot up a place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I never shot up a place or whatever. I don't think that's asking too much.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.